While washing up, the man was horrified to discover that an unknown black liquid was continuously oozing from his neck. At first, he thought he had used the wrong toiletry, but as he tried to clean it off, he was terrified to discover that the dark sludge was actually coming from inside his body. Moments later, the man collapsed to the floor, completely lifeless. The reason he ended up cursed by this black goo all started with an argument. In a small town, Darby was handling a domestic abuse case. But just as she was about to submit the evidence, the judge told her the police had never filed anything to the court. Confused, Darby looked back at Sheriff Williams, who sat in the audience, but he said nothing and simply gave a helpless look. Without evidence, Darby lost the case and returned home, defeated and frustrated. But the moment she walked through the door, she saw her father, Ron, having a date with his new girlfriend right in the living room. Darby was already furious, so she immediately kicked the woman out and scolded her father for bringing someone like that home. Ron had just been released from prison and had nowhere else to go, so he moved into Darby's house for the time being. Darby told her father to clean up his act and stop bringing people home, and if he did it again, she would make him leave. Frustrated by her attitude, Ron snapped back and the two erupted into an argument. In the end, Ron stormed out of the house in anger. Darby, feeling even more exhausted, went to her best friend Neila's bar to vent about her day, especially about how Sheriff Williams had suddenly turned his back on her. But Nila told her not to get too worked up. She'd heard from someone that the sheriff had been paid off by the plaintiff. If Darby wanted to win the case, she'd have to find real evidence. Hearing that Williams had taken a bribe, Darby finally understood why he hadn't submitted the evidence in court. What she didn't realize was that her angry father was also at the bar that night. Drunk and stumbling, Ron went to the back door to relieve himself, but someone inside the house saw him. The homeowner shouted at Ron to get lost or face the consequences. Ron, enraged, kicked down the wooden door, ready to confront whoever was inside. But the moment he opened the door, he froze in place, completely stunned. The next morning, Darby woke up groggy from the night before and was surprised to smell something cooking. She came downstairs to find her father, who never cooked, making breakfast. When he saw her, he plated some cooked meat and even apologized for his behavior the day before. Darby was caught off guard. How could the man, who'd always been a jerk, suddenly become so polite and well-spoken overnight? Had her father really changed? What she didn't know was the man standing before her wasn't her father at all. After breakfast, Darby remembered what Neila had told her. She checked Sheriff Williams' social media and found photos of him posing with the plaintiff. Angry, she stormed into the station and confronted Williams, demanding to know how much money he had taken. To her surprise, Williams didn't even deny it. He admitted he was planning to run for local office, and the plaintiff had funded his campaign in exchange for dodging jail. Learning that Williams had indeed taken the money, Darby was furious, and feeling frustrated, she left the station to search for other leads. However, just as Darby was heading home, Ron, who was washing up, suddenly noticed some black slime appearing on his neck. At first, he thought it was just foam, so he casually grabbed a tissue to wipe it away. But the more he wiped, the more it spread. Realizing something was seriously wrong, he looked closer and saw the sludge was coming from inside him. By the time Darby got home, she found her father unconscious in the bathroom. She immediately called for an ambulance, but by the time they arrived, Ron was already dead. Darby believed her father had been murdered and immediately called the police. Unfortunately, the officer dispatched to the scene was none other than Sheriff Williams, who had clashed with Darby earlier that day. Williams inspected the bathroom carefully and found no signs of a struggle, but Ron's death appeared deeply unsettling. His wounds had no blood, only thick black slime. In all his years on the force, Williams had never seen anything like it. To uncover the cause of death, the police brought Ron's body back to the station for an autopsy. The examination was handled by the coroner, Darius, and it didn't take long for him to sense something was terribly wrong. To his shock, Ron's body contained no blood, only that same black sludge. Could it be poisoning? Darius opened up Ron's chest to investigate further, and inside his abdomen he found a strange mass of tumor-like tissue. He extracted a few samples and sent them to the lab. But during the sampling process, Darius noticed the mass was emitting a bizarre sonic vibration. He immediately called in Williams and shared the discovery with him.
Jesus, man, stop. What are you doing?
Wait. Shh. You hear that?
All I hear are those damn dogs.
When Darius said the mass was alive, Williams thought he had misheard. Darius suspected it was some kind of mutation, which might have caused Ron's sudden collapse. Darby, meanwhile, was still struggling to accept her father's sudden death. She told Neila about how different her dad had seemed that morning, how she had actually believed he wanted to change for the better. But that hopeful version of him had only lasted a few hours. Was it just a final moment of clarity before death? Feeling overwhelmed, Darby drank heavily and eventually passed out on the couch. What she didn't notice was that, not long after she fell asleep, Neila's phone started ringing. As the ringtone played, Neila seemed to fall under some kind of trance and quickly left Darby's home. She arrived at a house and released the sound wave that had played from her phone. The next morning, Darby got a call from Williams. He told her Ron's test results were in and asked her to come to the station. Darby rushed over without hesitation. Darius explained to her that her father hadn't been murdered. He died from a sudden medical condition. The tumor in his abdomen had mutated and absorbed all the nutrients from his body, eventually causing his organs to fail. But there was something even more disturbing. Darius had discovered that the tumor seemed to be alive and highly sensitive to certain radio frequencies. However, Darby felt something didn't add up. A tumor that large should have caused her father pain. Why hadn't he felt a thing? Darius believed the tumor might have mutated in such a way that it kept Ron's vital signs stable, which could explain the lack of symptoms. As for the full explanation, he said it would require more testing and he planned to publish the case in a medical journal. Though Darby still found the story hard to accept, she had no choice but to acknowledge it. Her father had lived a reckless life, drugs, alcohol, and more than a few bad choices, so dying from some bizarre disease wasn't entirely unthinkable. After leaving the station, Darby started planning her father's funeral. But as soon as she got home, she received a series of strange text messages. They were from Gina, her father's girlfriend. Darby opened the texts and found they were filled with bizarre audio waveforms. She thought Gina was just playing a prank to get back at her for kicking her out of the house. She called Gina, planning to inform her of Ron's death. But to her shock, Gina told her the texts had come from Ron's number, sent just the night before, but Ron had already died the day before that. So who had sent those messages? As Darby puzzled over it, her eyes fell on something odd. Neila's shoes from the night before had traces of black slime on them. She suddenly remembered the same black goo covering the bathroom the day her father died. But Neila had never come to the house that day. So why were her shoes stained with that same substance? At the same time, Williams, having just finished his shift, headed to the bar to unwind. But as soon as he sat down, two bulky men approached him with grim expressions. Sensing danger, Williams tensed up. But before he could say a word, the man in front punched him straight to the ground. When Williams regained consciousness, he found himself in a pitch-black room. Before he could make sense of the situation, Neila walked toward him. She placed her hands over his ears, and instantly, Williams felt something slither inside his body through his ears. Whatever it was devouring him from within. As the process completed, a massive tumor-like mass separated from Neila's body, and from inside it, a perfect replica of Williams was born. Neila then stepped into an adjacent room, where Ron, who was supposed to be dead, was hanging from the ceiling. She clearly loathed him, tormenting his body repeatedly with long, writhing tendrils. But just as Neila reveled in her revenge, she turned and was stunned to find Darby standing at the doorway, watching in horror. After spotting the black slime on Neila's shoes the day before, Darby had suspected something was off. She brought the shoes to Darius, hoping he could confirm whether the goo matched what she had found in her father's bathroom. But when she arrived at the station, she was horrified to discover Darius dead, his body leaking the same black sludge. Darby feared the substance was some kind of infection, and thinking Neila might be infected too, she decided to check on her. But when she got to the bar, it was closed. Darby assumed Neila had gone out and turned to leave, but then she heard strange screams coming from the basement and noticed some eerie symbols in the corner. Curious and concerned, she entered through the back door, and that's when she saw it all. Seeing her closest friend transform into a monster broke Darby completely. She bolted from the basement, only to run straight into Williams. Darby tried to seek help from Williams, but to her shock, Williams turned on her and took control instead. He dragged her back to Neila, but instead of hurting her, Neila turned to face the wall. From it emerged a grotesque creature, covered in writhing tentacles. And at that moment, the truth was revealed. Ron really was a jerk. When Neila was just a child, Ron had violated her. Unable to cope with the trauma, Neila had tried to end her life. But in that moment, the creature appeared and merged with her. From that day forward, Neila felt reborn. She lured the wicked of the town into her basement. fed them to the creature, and replaced them with perfect replicas. That was why Ron had suddenly turned into a kind and apologetic man. He wasn't Ron at all. Neila tried to persuade Darby to join her, claiming that if they could eliminate every bad person, the world would be a better place. Under Neila's influence, the unconscious Darby slowly walked toward the creature on the wall, but just as she was about to touch it, she suddenly snapped out of it. Seeing Darby run, Neila chased after her without hesitation. But as she reached the door, she saw Darby toss high-proof liquor all over the basement floor. Before Neila could react, Darby flicked a lighter, engulfing the entire basement in flames. Darby barely escaped, but as she stumbled out, she felt something writhing inside her stomach. It was clear her story with the creature was far from over. But that's where the movie ends. That was the full story of Replicator, the latest sci-fi horror film of 2025. Overall, the film was fairly solid, though the visuals felt a bit rough, and the horror lacked a touch of sophistication. All right, that's all for today. See you next time.